2022 regulations allowed teams to be creative in their design to gain a lead over their competitors. From the start of the season, it was clear that Red Bull and Ferrari built a car that outpaces all the other teams. However, as the 2022 season unfolds and the teams in FIA understand the cars better, it seems that some teams went really creative with their designs. Mercedes has recently often been the initiator to blame Red Bull and Ferrari from having flex floors. Mercedes claims that both Red Bull and Ferrari found a way to change the floor levels to increase downforce levels. The FIA issued a new technical directive to prevent any Flexi floors from happening from the Grand Prix of France onwards. In this video, I will explain what these Flexi floors are and whether Mercedes' claim is justified. Before we get into this, it would mean a lot to me to like and subscribe to my channel, The Racing Guru. Flexible components are not something new in F1. The last couple years have been dominated by flexible front and rear wings. However, the new 2022 regulations introduced the Venturi effect, making the floor much more important to downforce generation. Since the floor is the part of the car which allows for most of the design freedom, it is not strange that many teams try to gain an advantage in this area. Before I will explain the flexible floors, we have to go back to the Grand Prix of Azerbaijan. It was during this Grand Prix that the porpoising of cars reached new heights. We all didn't forget the sight of Lewis Hamilton crippling out of his car. In the aftermath of this race, the FIA issued a new technical directive for the Grand Prix of Canada, stating that all teams should limit porpoising. The FIA would closely monitor the porpoising levels of all cars, and if needed, punish teams by forcing them to increase the car height. But the technical directive went further by stating that cars will also be checked upon the stiffness of their floors and that the FIA doesn't allow teams to have floors that have a flexibility of more than 2 millimeters. This came quite as a surprise to many teams, as there wasn't a reason to introduce this new technical directive. Or was there? Mercedes claims that both Ferrari and Red Bull found a loophole in their regulations. This loophole refers to the plank underneath the car. Before I explain this, I do want to point out that, at this point, no team has been found guilty yet, and that so far Mercedes speculates that both Red Bull and Ferrari use this loophole. The plank underneath an F1 car is used to see whether a car was driving too slow. It is a very easy and efficient way, as the plank is 10 millimeters thick before the race. After the race, this plank should still be at least 9 millimeters thick. If a plank is less than 9 millimeters thick, it means that too much material has been scraped off and the car was driving too low. You might wonder, what type of material do they use for these planks? Interestingly, teams are free to use their own type of materials, but the density is regulated. This prevents teams from using extremely hard materials that are almost impossible to lose thickness during the race. There are multiple holes in the plank to make measuring the thickness of the plank relatively easy. So far, it all sounds quite straightforward, right? So, where does the confusion come from? The confusion comes from earlier seasons. The FIA has been measuring floor thickness for a while now, but due to the characteristics of the previous generation cars, they only had to measure the front thickness of the plank. The older generation cars leaned forward, meaning that they had a high rake. A high rake is when the back of the car sits higher than the front part of the car, therefore leaning forward. Under these circumstances, only the front part of the plank would see wear during a race, so the FIA never bothered to measure the back part of the plank. The FIA stuck to the same way of measuring plank thickness for the 2022 season. However, as we have seen with many teams, but predominantly Mercedes, bouncing became a real issue. As the car bounces over the track, both the front and back part of the plank hit the bottom and experience wear. The 2022 cars don't use a rake anymore to generate downforce, but rather all face straight designs. Because the cars are straight and experience a form of bouncing, the complete plank experiences wear. Okay, but why would some teams use a flexible floor? What advantage does it give them? All teams want to have their car sit as close to the track surface as possible, as it reduces drag and increases downforce. One of the key reasons why Mercedes wasn't keen on increasing its car heights is that they would lose significant car performance. A flex floor is a floor with a hard and soft component. The hard component sits at the front part, which is also the part the FIA checks. The soft part sits at the back of the plank. As the car bounces over the track, the soft part has the ability to flex with the bouncing, reducing the porpoising effects, but keeping the advantages of a lower car height setup. Because the floor flexes, the plank has limited wear, so once the FIA checks the thickness, the car has no problem getting through the checkup. The flexibility is also very difficult to spot as it happens underneath the car, and all FIA checks for flexible wings and floors are done when the car is standing still. The FIA mimics racing situations by putting excessive weight on the car components. As we have seen with last year's flexible rear wings, the teams are smart enough to develop components that are stiff when the car is not moving, but have the capability to bend under speed. Calculations indicate that this technique can gain 1.5 to 2/10 of a second per lap. Wolff has been vocal in its accusations toward Red Bull and Ferrari. However, Christian Horner is very clear in his response. Toto's claims are ridiculous. It is complete nonsense. I think that Toto is getting confused about a couple things. He talks about our car, but I am not the slightest worried that our car won't get through the new FIA checks. On the other hand, Ferrari did acknowledge that they have to make some amendments with their floor. Whether this is an open acknowledgement to the situation, I leave up to you. The story does remain interesting and is not over yet. If Ferrari did use a flexible floor, then it can lead to a performance loss when having to change it during one of the upcoming races. What do you think? Who do you think is guilty? Red Bull or Ferrari, or maybe both? Let us know in the comments section below.